Hey friends, I don't really have any dinner prep to do today because it's in the Instant Pot. It was a dump and go recipe, our favorite creamy salsa chicken. So I decided to go ahead and take some time to pressure can 8 pints of raw packed chicken. Several of you have asked to do a video on this. It's so simple, it's ridiculous. And I just cannot tell you how convenient it is to have this chicken on your pantry shelf. I'm gonna do the same thing with ground venison. Of course, you can use ground beef or ground sausage as well, but that will be in another video. I will show you how I trim up my chicken, how I cut it into chunks, and how to process it. I do not like my chicken to have any gristle or fat on it. So when I'm going to freeze or pressure can my chicken, I make sure to trim it before processing or freezing it. I've been pressure canning chicken for so many years, I can't remember when I started, but it was probably one of my first canning projects. It's so incredibly simple, and it's definitely one of the most convenient foods to have on your pantry shelf. Home canned chicken comes out of the jar exactly like canned chicken that you would buy from the grocery store. It's similar in texture to tuna as well. I've heard the texture is different if you cook or grill your chicken before you process it, but I really like the convenience of raw packed chicken. I'll have to try it a different way some other time. For raw packed chicken, all I do is cut the chicken into chunks. It really doesn't matter how small or how large they are. I typically will do them no more than a few inches in diameter. I know I probably don't have to say this, but I should probably explain anyways that raw packed chicken just means you are packing raw chicken in the jar. You are not doing any cooking first. In the past, I haven't added anything to my jars but a little bit of water or broth. However, I have started to realize that sometimes a little bit of seasoning or spice goes a long way. When canning pints, I add half a teaspoon of salt. When I do quarts, I add a full teaspoon. Now I'm going to add a little bit of water to get just above 1 inch headspace because I'm going to use a little tool to get the bubbles out of my jars before I make sure we're right at 1 inch. Now I'm just going to wipe the edges of my jars off before I add the lids and rings. Most canning instructions say tighten your lids finger tight. That just means you're not putting your whole arm and wrist into tightening your ring around your jar. You're just using your fingers. I almost never hot pack my jars when I'm pressure canning. That just means that you are adding hot contents into your jar and you're adding your jars into hot water already on the stove. You can see here that I just added water from the sink, a couple of inches on the bottom, and then once all of my jars are in, I will get the water level exactly where it needs to be. I use a very inexpensive Presto canner that I got from Walmart, goodness, probably 15 years ago for about $67. You can see here that bottom line is for when you're canning pints and the top line is for quarts. So I got my water right to the bottom line, and now I'm ready to get it started. I had far more chicken than I realized, so I was able to fill 7 quart jars in addition to those 8 pint jars. As pressure builds and the button pops up, you're going to let the steam release from the pressure valve for about 10 minutes before you add your weight. Now, of course, this all depends on what type of canner you have. Please familiarize yourself with the manual that belongs to your pressure canner and find videos that are specific to yours if you have any questions. Once your weight starts rocking, you'll set the timer for 75 minutes for pints and 90 minutes for quarts. Look at all of this chicken. There's so much I can do with this, and I'm thrilled to have it on my pantry shelf. It's perfect for soups, stews, chicken chili, adding to quesadillas, casseroles, making chicken salad. I could go on, but the point is, it's very convenient to have cooked chicken on your pantry shelf. I mentioned in this video that I've never pressure canned red meat before. Well, this freezer that you're looking at right here was a bit of a catastrophe. It has about 200 pounds of venison in it, and we haven't even opened this freezer since we filled it. But when I went to put a broom back in the laundry room the other day, I realized this freezer was just barely cracked open, like someone or even the dog had bumped it. It doesn't really have the seal quite as tight as our other freezer and our refrigerator in the kitchen. There was frost all over the shelves, ice, blood dripping. Thankfully, the only things that had started to thaw were about 10 pounds that were right in the front of the shelves. So I pulled those out and decided what better time to can this red meat than right now. So I let it defrost in the fridge the rest of the way for the next couple of days and decided to go ahead and add that to this video. So I did about 10 pounds of ground venison. I cooked it in the skillet first. I added some salt, pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder because there's almost no red meat dishes that I make that don't have those seasonings in the meat when I start. I did go ahead and cook the meat thoroughly, but it's not entirely crucial because you are going to pressure can all of this for 90 minutes. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever pressure canned raw ground meat. I've heard that it ends up having the texture of like canned dog food, which I've never actually experienced. But I've heard if you brown your meat first, then pressure can it, when you're ready to use it, you can drain it, toss it back in the skillet to crisp it up a bit, and it tastes more like freshly browned meat. I read online that about 1 pound of meat will fill a pint jar, so I assumed 10 pounds would fill about 10 pints. I was really surprised with how much meat I had left over after I filled these 8 pints, so I was excited to see I was going to have a lot more to can. Venison is extremely lean and doesn't have a whole lot of flavor on its own, so I did decide to can this in beef broth. If you keep a lot of meat in the freezer, don't forget about pressure canning. If you ever had your freezers fail, if your power went out and you don't have a generator backup, you can pull all that meat out of the freezer, pressure can it, and not lose anything. The processing time for the venison is the same as the chicken, 75 minutes at 10 pounds pressure for pints and 90 minutes for quarts. I hope this gives you the confidence to pressure can some of your meat. Just try one batch. It's amazing the convenience you have right there on your pantry shelf. You don't have to rely on the refrigerator or the freezer, and your convenience meals are kicked up a notch by having meat already cooked on your shelf and ready to go for dinner. I did want to add one last detail. You may have noticed in some of the previous pictures, some of my jars have rings on them and some do not. Once I pull my jars out of the pressure canner, I let them sit on the counter, usually on a towel or a cloth napkin because the granite countertops stay extremely cold, until about 24 hours after they have been processed. Then I will wipe the jars down and remove the rings before storing them in the pantry. This ensures that I am able to check every seal on every jar before I put it in the pantry. I have had a few seals fail over the last year, which is the first time that I've experienced that in all my years of canning. So removing the rings is actually a great practice to make sure you're checking every seal before you put it in the pantry. Thanks for watching.